August 1985, Langley, Virginia. A man sits alone in a fourth-floor office of CIA headquarters, a yellow legal pad in front of him, a pen in his hand. He is writing a letter. Not to his wife, not to his handler, to no one in particular. He sets it down unsigned and walks out to his car. This is the story of Aldrich Ames, the most damaging spy in the history of the Central Intelligence Agency, and the man who should have been caught a decade before he was. Ames joined the CIA in 1962, fresh out of the University of Chicago. His father had worked for the agency. It felt like inheritance. He was assigned to the Soviet division, the most sensitive corner of American intelligence, where his job was to recruit Russians to spy against their own government. He was good at it, patient, methodical, fluent in the psychology of men who had something to hide. What nobody at Langley noticed, or chose to notice, was that Ames himself had plenty to hide. By the early 1980s, his career was stalling. He had a drinking problem that was visible enough for colleagues to joke about it openly. He was going through an expensive divorce from his first wife. He had debts. Then he met Rosario Casas Dupuy, a Colombian woman working at the Colombian embassy in Mexico City, where Ames was stationed. She had expensive tastes. He wanted to keep her. The math was not working. In April 1985, Ames walked into the Soviet embassy in Washington, D.C. He handed over a sealed envelope to the KGB resident. Inside was the name of two Soviet intelligence officers the CIA was running as double agents. In exchange, he asked for $50,000. It was, he would later say, supposed to be a one-time thing. It was not a one-time thing. Over the next 9 years, Aldrich Ames passed the KGB the identities of every significant Soviet asset the CIA had. The number of agents he burned is still not fully known. At least 10 were executed. Others disappeared into the Soviet prison system. The intelligence networks that American officers had spent decades building, quietly, carefully, at enormous human cost, were dismantled in a matter of months. The KGB knew who every source was. They fed false information back through the same channels. For years, the CIA believed it was receiving intelligence. It was receiving whatever Moscow wanted it to see. In return, Ames was paid approximately $4.6 million over the course of his operation. It is the largest known payment ever made by a foreign government to an American spy. The money was not subtle. In 1986, on a government salary of roughly $60,000 a year, Ames paid cash for a house in Arlington, Virginia. $540,000. He drove a Jaguar. He and Rosario took vacations to Europe and South America. He wore tailored suits. He paid off $150,000 in credit card debt in a single transaction. His colleagues noticed. His supervisors were told. A financial review was opened and then quietly dropped. Inside the CIA, officers running Soviet assets started to understand something was wrong. Sources were going silent. Men who had checked in reliably for years stopped making contact. Some were reported arrested, some executed. The conclusion was unavoidable. There was a mole. The counterintelligence investigation that followed was one of the most confused and protracted in American history. At various points, investigators suspected the leak was coming from the FBI, from a technical penetration of communication systems, from a Soviet asset who had observed CIA tradecraft. The possibility that a senior CIA officer with full access to the Soviet division was the source took years to seriously consider. partly because the implications were too large, partly because Ames was a known quantity. He had been vetted. He had passed polygraphs. He was one of them. He did pass polygraphs. By 1991, a joint FBI-CIA task force had been quietly assembled. It was called the Special Investigations Unit, though most people working the case used a different name internally: the Mole Hunters. They began systematically eliminating suspects. Ames was on the list from relatively early. His finances were flagged again. This time, someone ran the numbers properly. The house, the car, the cash payments, the vacations, the suits. None of it was explainable on his salary, even with Rosario working. Not even close. In 1992, the FBI obtained a sample of Ames's trash from outside his Arlington home. In it, they found torn pieces of a note that had been written in Russian. They also found evidence that Ames had been meeting with a Soviet contact under the cover of legitimate diplomatic functions. They began physical surveillance. They tapped his phones. They watched his house. On October 9, 1992, FBI surveillance observed Ames leaving a chalk mark on a mailbox in a Northern Virginia neighborhood. It was a signal, a dead drop notification, the kind of tradecraft the KGB had been using for 40 years. Ames was still active. He was still running. Over the following year, investigators built the case methodically. They obtained his financial records. They traced the wire transfers from a Colombian bank account into which the KGB had deposited payments routed through a series of shell companies. They found evidence of meetings in Bogotá, in Caracas, in Rome. They identified his KGB handler by name. On February 21, 1994, Aldrich Ames left his house in Arlington and drove towards CIA headquarters. He never arrived. FBI agents stopped his car on Route 123. He was arrested without incident. He did not resist. He did not speak. He sat in the back of the federal vehicle and looked at his hands. Rosario was arrested at the house the same morning. She had known since 1985. She had spent the money with him. She received 63 months. Ames received life without parole. He is currently held at a federal correctional institution in Pennsylvania. He has given interviews from prison. In several of them, he has expressed the view that the CIA's Soviet sources, the men he identified to the KGB, were not heroes. They were traitors to their own country, he said. He seemed to believe this genuinely. The damage Ames caused has never been fully calculated. The assets he burned represented decades of human intelligence infrastructure. Their replacements, where they exist, are not publicly known. The intelligence gaps created in the late 1980s shaped what the United States did and did not understand about Soviet decision-making in the final years of the Cold War. How much of what Washington believed about Moscow during that period was accurate, and how much was a managed fiction delivered through compromised channels, is a question that remains open. In 2010, a former KGB general gave an interview to a Russian newspaper. He was asked about the American mole cases of the Cold War era. He mentioned Ames by name. He called him reliable. Professionally careful, he said. A serious man. He then mentioned, almost in passing, that Ames had not been the only source inside the CIA during that period. The interviewer did not follow up. The general did not elaborate. The newspaper ran the quote without comment. The FBI has never publicly confirmed or denied whether a second penetration of the CIA's Soviet division was ever identified. The relevant counterintelligence files remain classified. The investigation, if there is one, has no public dossier, no named suspects, no announced conclusion. Somewhere in those years, more names were passed. More men went quiet. The second source has never been found.